The Experiment by Martin Raim. Page 14. There was no way out. The walls of his cell were built of thick cement block. The huge door was made of steel. The floor and the ceiling were made of concrete, and there were no windows. The only light came from a light bulb that was covered by a metal shield. There was no way out, or so it seemed. He had volunteered to be part of a scientific experiment and had been put in the cell to test the cleverness of a human mind. The cell was empty, and he was not allowed to take anything into it, but he had been told that there was one way to escape from the cell, and he had 3 hours to find it. He began with the door. It stood before him, huge and gray. The three large hinges on the door were riveted into the wall and could not be removed. The door itself seemed too big for the small cell, and for a minute he wondered if it had been put up first and the rest of the cell built around it. Page 15. Finally, he turned away from the door and looked around. He tried pushing against the cement blocks to see if any of them were loose. He searched the floor for a trap door. Then he glanced up at the ceiling. The shield around the light bulb. His mind raced. The metal shield could be used as a tool, the tool he needed. He had found the way to escape. He moved under the shield and looked closely at it. One good strong pull would free it, he decided. He reached up, grabbed hold of it, and pulled. But the shield stayed attached to the ceiling. He grabbed the shield again, twisting it as he pulled. He felt it rip free, and he fell to the floor, clutching his treasure. The shield was shaped like a cone and had been fastened to the ceiling by three long metal prongs. These prongs were sharp, but they were not strong enough to cut through steel or concrete or cement. He felt hopelessness creep over him. He could find no use for the shield as a tool. The shield was not what he needed to get out. Then he had a brilliant idea. True, the metal prongs of the shield could not cut through the steel door or the concrete floor or the cement blocks in the wall, but the prongs might be strong enough to dig out the mortar that held the cement blocks in place. He pulled off one of the prongs and scraped hard at the mortar. The mortar crumbled into powder. His idea worked. If he removed enough mortar, he could loosen a couple of cement blocks, then push them out and escape. Page 16. He selected 2 blocks near the door and set to work. The prong dug into the mortar and sent it flying in a steady stream. The prong was just what he had needed. Now he was sure he would escape, but his mind made a sudden careless twist, and the metal prong broke into 2 useless pieces. At first, a huge wave of anger stunned him. Then he remembered that the shield had 2 more prongs. He pulled off another prong, and he went back to work. He decided he must be more careful. Nothing must go wrong. There was still plenty of time left. Soon he had chipped out 4 inches of mortar, but the jagged edges of the cement blocks had torn the skin off his knuckles. His hands were bleeding from a dozen burning cuts. His back and shoulders were hurt from the strain of working in one position. The mortar dust blew into his eyes and down his throat. The work dragged on slower and slower. Suddenly, the second prong broke. For a minute, he welcomed the excuse to stop working, but the thought of failure sent him back into action. He pulled off the third and last prong and went to work again. He was a man who did not like to lose. He had to win. The work dragged on. He became numb to the pain in his hands, to the ache in his shoulders. His fingers moved blindly, and his attack against the mortar grew weaker and weaker. At last he broke through. He had dug out enough mortar so that now he could see light between the cement blocks. Page 17. With a spurt of energy, he chipped away at the rest of the mortar. Of course there was a way out. He had found it, hadn't he? He had proved that a clever mind could solve any problem. That's how he had done it, with his own cleverness. At that instant, the third prong snapped in his hand. He stared at the useless pieces. Then, in a blind rage, he slammed his fist against the wall. Page 18. Behind him, the door of the cell opened slowly. His time had run out. His part of the experiment was over. He was not allowed to talk about the experiment or about his plan of escape. However, he was sure that he could have escaped. He was convinced that he almost had. Actually, he had not even come close. The shield had been put around the light bulb only as a shade for the light. The metal prongs were not meant to be used as a tool. The man had been clever, but he had let his cleverness sidetrack him. If he had not been so quick to use the shield as a tool, if he had not spent all his time chipping out the mortar, and if he had not stopped searching the cell, he might have found the real way out. He might have discovered that he could have left the cell as easily as he entered, for the huge door had never been locked.